My name is Joanna Whitfield. I'm 65 years old, a widow, and for most of my life I worked quietly behind the numbers as a certified public accountant. I built ledgers when other women built gardens, though in time, I learned that tending roses and tending balance sheets required the same patience. That morning, I pinned a small silver brooch to my jacket and told myself I was ready to hear my late husband's final words. If you've ever walked into a room where every eye has already decided who you are, stay with me. What happened inside that room changed the course of my family's life and reminded me that silence, when grounded in truth, can speak louder than laughter. The mahogany table stretched nearly the length of the old law office in Savannah. Sunlight slipped through tall windows, pooling over documents stacked in neat rows. At the head sat Alex Garner, my husband's estate attorney, calm as a clock. Across from me, my son Mark adjusted his cufflinks without meeting my eyes. Beside him, his wife Sophie straightened a silk scarf and whispered something that drew a grin from my stepson, Chad. Alex cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. As you know, we're here to read Mr. Whitfield's will." Sophie leaned forward before he could continue. "We'll make this simple," she said, her voice bright as glass. "We'll take the mansion and the company. She can keep her garden." The words landed like a slap dressed in perfume. For a breath, no one moved. Then came the laughter, quiet at first, then fuller, rolling across the table. Chad chuckled, shaking his head, as if the remark were clever. Mark managed a nervous smile, the kind a man wears when he fears both sides. I folded my hands and felt the edge of my wedding band press against my palm. The scent of roses I'd brought in earlier clung faintly to my sleeve. It steadied me. Alex's gaze flicked toward me, then back to the others. "Mrs. Whitfield's garden, yes," he said evenly. "But before any assumptions, we'll proceed according to the documents." Sophie's laugh thinned. Of course," she said. "We're just teasing." But her eyes slid over me again, measuring, dismissive. She noticed the modest string of pearls at my neck, the one Harold had given me our first Christmas. "Cute necklace," she murmured to Mark. "Vintage is making a comeback." Mark didn't answer. He shifted in his chair, tapping the table, as if the rhythm might hide his discomfort. Alex lifted the first folder, his fingers resting on a crimson tab. "This is the primary will," he explained. "Signed 2 years ago. We'll review each clause. However, before we conclude, there is an additional document, one that carries Mr. Whitfield's final directives." Sophie blinked. "Additional?" "Yes, a codicil, executed shortly before his passing." Chad frowned. "You mean Dad changed something?" Alex nodded once. "He did." The air in the room shifted. The laughter softened into uneasy silence. Somewhere beyond the glass, a church bell marked the hour, solemn and exact. As Alex began reading the formal preamble, my mind wandered to Harold's handwriting. The bold loops of his signature, the way he dotted his I's with care. He'd told me once, "The truth doesn't shout, Joe. It waits." Sophie crossed her legs, the click of her heels sharp against the marble floor. "Well, I hope this doesn't take all day," she whispered. "We have a meeting with the decorator." I glanced at her hands, manicured and gleaming, then at Mark's tense jaw. The silence between them told stories neither dared to confess. Alex continued, voice steady. The legal phrases stacked neatly. Bequeath, devise, assign. They washed over the table like measured waves. I listened, not for favor, but for fairness. Each line built a bridge toward something inevitable. When he paused to turn a page, Sophie leaned back, smiling thinly. "Really, Joanna," she said, "you'll love the guest house once we redo it. We'll keep some of your flowers for nostalgia." Her words brushed against me like thorns, small but deliberate. I breathed in through my nose, slow and quiet, tasting the faint sweetness of the roses I'd clipped that morning. Their petals were pale ivory, edges touched with pink. Harold had named that variety Grace's Promise. Alex closed the first folder and placed a second on top, this one sealed with a gold sticker. "We'll review this next," he said. "It contains Mr. Whitfield's most recent instructions, dated 72 hours before his passing." Mark straightened, color draining from his face. Chad's hand froze midway to his coffee. Sophie laughed again, too loud this time. "Oh, come on," she said. "You're not telling us he scribbled something last minute?" Alex met her eyes. "Not scribbled. Signed, witnessed, and notarized." Silence folded over the room. I reached into my purse and felt the smooth handle of my pruning shears, the small pair Harold had given me when we planted our first rosebush. My fingers closed around them, not in anger, but remembrance. Every cut I'd ever made in the garden had been for growth, not destruction. I set the purse beside my chair and lifted my chin. Whatever waited inside that envelope, I would meet it the same way I met every storm, rooted, steady, and unafraid. Justice, like a rose, begins in the soil no one sees. The room felt smaller after Alex mentioned the codicil. Even the air carried weight, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. He broke the seal with practiced care, and for a moment, the crisp sound of tearing paper was the only thing anyone could hear. "This," Alex began, sliding a single sheet into the light, "is the codicil. It was executed 72 hours before Mr. Whitfield passed. It carries the full force of his final intent." Mark's fingers drummed against the table. "Dad never told me about another document." Alex adjusted his glasses. "He prepared it privately. It amends ownership details and specifies fiduciary control." Sophie shifted in her chair, her earlier brightness dulled. "Ownership details?" Alex nodded. "Mr. Whitfield wanted clarity. He left nothing to chance." Her lips pressed thin. "I'm sure it's nothing major," she said quickly. "Harold trusted us. We're family." The word family echoed, but not kindly. I looked across the table at my son. His eyes darted from the document to Sophie, then down to his watch. That was how he always handled discomfort, by searching for exits that weren't doors. Chad crossed his arms. "Dad was sentimental. Maybe he just added a note." Alex's voice stayed even. "It's more than a note." He placed the page before him and read aloud. "This codicil shall supersede any prior assignment of property or authority not recorded in the original will. The amendments reflect Mr. Whitfield's considered judgment after consultation and review." A slow hush fell. Even Sophie's breathing grew shallow. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingertips brushing the faint lines of callus formed by years of pruning. Beneath the polished surface of that table, I traced circles against my skin and thought of Harold's steady hand guiding mine through old ledgers. He used to say, "Keep every receipt, Joe. Someday, truth will ask for proof." Alex continued, outlining the clauses. Clause 1 revisits the estate deed. Clause 2 addresses executive authority of the operating company. Clause 3 defines oversight for financial compliance. Mark swallowed. "So, oversight means what exactly?" "It means," Alex said gently, "that certain decisions require sign-off from the appointed trustee." "And who's that?" Sophie asked. Alex didn't answer right away. He simply set his pen across the page, aligning it perfectly with the margin, as though precision might cushion the blow. "We'll reach that shortly," he said. Sophie forced a laugh that didn't land. "I'm sure Harold named Mark. He's the eldest son. That's tradition." Chad leaned back, smirking. "Technically, I'm older." "That's not what I meant," she snapped. their voices tangled, brittle as dry stems. Alex let them fade before he spoke again. Mr. Whitfield wasn't guided by tradition. He was guided by accountability. I glanced at the photograph hanging above the fireplace. Harold in his navy suit, the hint of a smile behind serious eyes. It was taken the year we opened our first office. We'd signed the lease together, hands inked from drafting contracts. He'd said then, "If we build it right, it will outlive our pride." Sophie turned toward me. "You look awfully calm," she said. "Aren't you curious what's in there?" "Curiosity is best served after listening," I replied. She tilted her head, studying me as if silence itself were arrogance. Mark coughed softly, staring at his clasped hands. Alex resumed reading, voice low, deliberate. The codicil spelled out each revision in careful language. Words like trustee, oversight, revocation moved across the page, like chess pieces claiming their squares. Outside, a gull cried above the river. The sound slipped through the open window and faded into the hush that followed each sentence. By the time Alex folded the document, the room seemed colder. He placed the page back in its envelope and sealed it with a single touch. "These are Mr. Whitfield's last instructions. All supporting documents will verify their authenticity." Mark exhaled through his nose. I didn't know he was still making changes. "He wanted order," Alex said, "and peace." Sophie crossed her arms. "Peace? This sounds like control from beyond the grave." I looked at her gently. Sometimes peace requires structure. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Alex gathered the files into a neat stack. "We'll review the deed next. It will clarify ownership of the primary residence and corporate shares." Sophie forced a smile. "Good. Then we can move on." I glanced once more at Harold's photograph. The light from the window caught the edge of the frame, glinting like a quiet signature. Every promise he ever made to fairness lived inside that glint. In the hush that followed, I felt his presence settle like sunlight on paper, warm, patient, waiting for truth to reveal its form. Alex placed a heavy binder on the table. Its spine bore a single label: Property Deed and Operating Agreement, Rosecliff Estates. He flipped it open, the hinges creaking in the silence. One by one he laid out copies, each stamped and notarized, the ink dark against cream paper. "This," he said, tapping the first page, "is the recorded deed for the Whitfield Mansion, dated June 3rd, 1998. Ownership is vested under the Joanna Whitfield Living Trust." Sophie blinked, uncomprehending. "What?" he repeated, calm and certain. "The property belongs to the living trust established by Mrs. Joanna Whitfield." Chad leaned forward. "That's impossible. Dad built this house." "Indeed," Alex replied, "and he placed it under joint trust management. The grantor and trustee is Mrs. Whitfield. The deed is valid, witnessed, and filed with the county clerk." Mark's chair scraped against the floor. "Mom, is that true?" I nodded once. "Your father and I built it together. He wanted long-term security." Sophie's face flushed. "So what does that mean? Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Alex cut in, "the mansion isn't part of the distributable estate. It has remained under the living trust since its inception. No transfer, no lien, no reassignment." The room went still. The same people who had laughed minutes earlier now searched for words that would not come. Sophie's polished nails tapped the table, the rhythm quickening with her breath. "Surely," she said, forcing a laugh, "there must be a mistake. Harold wouldn't do that without telling us." Alex opened another folder, revealing an affidavit sealed with a blue ribbon. "Mr. Whitfield reaffirmed this trust annually. Here's the latest update, recorded last spring. You'll also find an operating agreement assigning corporate authority to the same entity." Chad frowned. "Operating agreement?" "Yes. Alex said. Rosecliff Enterprises. Mrs. Whitfield holds the executive seat. That was formalized before Mr. Whitfield's illness. Sophie's voice rose. You mean she owns both the house and the company? Alex folded his hands. She manages them. Ownership follows management under trust law. Mark's eyes found mine. Shame flickered across his face, soft but visible. I met his gaze without anger. Your father wanted order, I said quietly. He trusted I would maintain it. Sophie opened her purse with sudden urgency, perhaps looking for an argument she could hold. The contents shifted. A small leather wallet fell to the floor. When she bent to pick it up, several papers slid out and scattered like loose petals. Chad stooped first, gathering the slips. His brow furrowed. What's this? Sophie snatched them back, too late. Alex reached for one, eyes narrowing as he scanned the text. An invoice from Milan, jewelry appraisal, and a travel itinerary labeled Italy Luxury Collection. Sophie's hand trembled. Those are personal. Alex's tone remained professional. They appear to be recent, and the amounts are substantial. Mark rubbed his temples. Sophie, when did you... She pressed her lips together. It doesn't matter. We'll sort it out later. Actually, Alex said, it will matter. These records suggest expenditures drawn from estate accounts. We'll verify sources before final reconciliation. Her shoulders stiffened. You're implying I did something wrong. No implication, he replied. Just documentation. Chad leaned back, muttering under his breath. Guess we're not the only ones surprised today. I took a slow breath, eyes resting on the rose-patterned curtains framing the window. Outside, the late morning light glimmered on the garden pond. The reflection of clouds drifted across the water, calm and certain of their path. Inside, certainty had become scarce. Sophie avoided every eye. Mark stared at the floor. The laughter that had filled the room earlier now seemed like something from another life. A careless melody silenced by fact. Alex gathered the documents into a precise stack. For the record, the deed and agreement stand uncontested unless legal proof suggests otherwise. Until then, Mrs. Whitfield's authority remains intact. Sophie exhaled through clenched teeth. Fine, if that's how he wanted it. It's how he trusted it, I corrected gently. She turned away, her reflection caught in the polished cabinet behind her. The glass returned a version of herself she hadn't expected to see, small, uncertain, and framed by the very house she'd claimed. Mark reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Papers rustled, the faint echo of lives measured in contracts and choices. Alex closed the binder, the click of the metal rings sharp as punctuation. We'll proceed to supporting evidence next. Video statements, bank filings, and trust summaries. Chad shook his head. This is a lot to process. Truth often is, Alex replied. I rested my hand on the cool surface of the table, the wood smooth beneath my fingers. Each ring in its grain told a story of growth, slow, deliberate, shaped by seasons that never rushed. Facts, like trees, take root long before the world notices. The storm in the room eased into uneasy quiet. What had begun as laughter was now replaced by the rustle of shifting papers and the weight of unspoken questions. Alex reached into his briefcase, withdrew a slim folder bound in blue, and set it gently before him. This file, he said, contains documentation Mr. Whitfield prepared over the years. Professional records, financial statements, and personal correspondence. They clarify Mrs. Whitfield's role in the family enterprise. Sophie's brow knit. Her role? She wasn't running the company. Alex opened the folder and revealed a set of certificates, each embossed with a corporate seal. Mrs. Whitfield holds an MBA and a CPA license, both active at the time the company was founded. These are her original credentials. She served as co-founder and chief financial officer for the first decade. Sophie blinked. That can't be right. Harold never mentioned it. He didn't need to, Alex said. She handled compliance, tax filings, payroll. Quiet work seldom asks for applause. Mark stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. Mom, you never told us. I folded my hands together. You didn't ask. Your father and I agreed. He'd lead in public, I'd lead behind the walls. We wanted the business to stand taller than either of our names. Chad rubbed the back of his neck. I thought you just helped with the garden. The garden came later, I said softly. Numbers first, roses after. Balance sheets don't bloom without care either. Sophie crossed her arms, searching for solid ground. Even so, it doesn't mean she... Alex interrupted gently. There's also a letter. He slid a cream envelope across the table. Mr. Whitfield wrote it by hand the week before his passing. He asked me to deliver it once the estate reached this stage. My breath caught as I recognized Harold's bold script. I hesitated, then broke the seal. The paper smelled, faintly of cedar, like his desk drawers. His words flowed steady, familiar. Joe, if truth cuts, let it cut clean. We built these walls to shelter, not divide. When they question what's yours, remind them ownership was never about title. It was about trust. Keep your grace. Justice with gentleness, always. The ink blurred slightly as I blinked away the sting in my eyes. Across the table, Mark lowered his gaze. Chad shifted, uneasy. Sophie said nothing, though her grip on her scarf loosened. I refolded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Your father wanted peace, I said quietly. He believed kindness could stand beside order. Alex placed another sheet beside the folder. This is a payroll ledger from the early years. Mrs. Whitfield's signature appears on every check run, and here, a corporate resolution naming her interim executive during Mr. Whitfield's deployment in '99. Mark's voice softened. I remember that year. You were always at the office late. You were still in school, I said. I came home after you were asleep. He nodded, shame coloring his expression. I never realized. Most people don't notice what keeps the lights on, I replied. Sophie's eyes flicked toward me, uncertain now. Why stay silent all these years? Because work done in quiet doesn't need applause, I said. And because your father and I built something meant to last beyond our egos. Legacy is stronger when it's humble. Alex gathered the documents into a careful stack. These records confirm Mrs. Whitfield's consistent role. The codicil merely acknowledges what was already true. The room absorbed his words. Outside, a wind stirred the branches, scattering sunlight across the curtains in moving patches. It felt like breath, returning to walls that had been holding it too long. Mark reached toward me, his hand tentative. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have trusted you. I touched his fingers lightly. Trust is like soil, I said. It renews when tended. Chad cleared his throat. Guess we all have some tending to do. Sophie remained still, eyes lowered, as if studying her own reflection in the polished table. For the first time that morning, there was no defiance in her silence, only thought. Alex closed the folder and set it aside. With this context, we can move forward to the next matter. Financial discrepancies must be reviewed. Transparency will serve everyone. I glanced again at Harold's letter resting beside the binder. His words lingered like the faint hum after a song ends. Justice with gentleness. In a house once filled with echoes, truth was beginning to find its voice. Alex reached for a crimson folder resting near his briefcase. Its color bled across the polished table like a warning. He set it down gently, but the gesture alone shifted the air in the room. Everyone leaned closer, drawn by instinct or fear. "This file," he began, "concerns a loan obtained in the past 12 months. The amount is $80,000. The borrower of record is Mrs. Sophie Whitfield." Sophie froze. "That's not right. I never—" Alex lifted a document and turned it toward her. "Here is the promissory note. The loan was secured using the Whitfield mansion as collateral." Her voice rose. "That's impossible. I'm not the owner." "Correct," Alex said evenly, "which makes this document invalid. The property cannot be pledged without the trustee's consent." The words landed heavy, like stones dropped into water. Mark straightened, his expression pale. "Sophie, why would you—" She interrupted, words tumbling fast. "It was supposed to be temporary, just a bridge loan. Evan said it was safe. We needed funds for the expansion. I didn't think—" Alex flipped another page. "Evan Benson of Benson Brokerage? His name appears on the consulting invoice. $20,000 marked as advisory fee." Sophie clasped her hands. "He handled the paperwork. He said everyone does it." "That may be common," Alex replied, "but it's not lawful when using assets you don't own." The folder spread open, revealing photocopies of bank statements and receipts. In the corner, an itinerary gleamed with gold lettering: Milan Fashion Week. Next to it, a jeweler's invoice listed a diamond ring, 6 carats, purchase confirmed 2 months prior. Sophie's breath quickened. "Those aren't related." Mark's voice cracked. $80,000, Sophie. Was this for the business or for vacations?" Tears welled behind her eyes. "It was supposed to make us look capable. Investors judge appearances." I looked at her, steady but not cruel. "Appearances fade. Paperwork remains." She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. "I didn't mean harm. I just wanted us to seem successful." Alex's tone softened, but stayed firm. "Intent doesn't erase ink. The loan exists. The collateral is fraudulent. If contested, the bank could pursue charges. However, since the true owner never authorized it, there's recourse through correction, not punishment." Mark sank back into his chair. "How do we fix it?" "By acknowledgement and restitution," Alex said. "The lender will void the lien once repayment begins. Funds misallocated from joint accounts must be restored, and Mrs. Whitfield, as trustee, will determine appropriate terms." All eyes turned toward me. The garden outside shimmered under noon light, every leaf trembling with wind. I took a breath, measured by memory. "We'll correct what's broken, but correction isn't indulgence." Sophie swallowed. "Does that mean you'll press charges?" "No," I said, "but forgiveness comes with structure." She nodded slowly, shoulders sinking under the weight of her own choices. Alex arranged the papers into a tidy row. "For record-keeping, we'll need signatures confirming the admission. Once filed, the fraudulent pledge will be cleared. Mrs. Whitfield's trust remains unencumbered." Sophie wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. "I thought I was helping." "Help is measured in honesty," I replied. "Without it, even good intentions cost too much." Mark reached across the table, his hand hesitating before resting on hers. "We'll work through it, but no more secrets." She nodded, lips quivering. "No more." Alex slid a blank acknowledgement form toward them. "We'll complete this later today. For now, let's proceed carefully. Transparency benefits everyone." The clock above the mantel ticked on, indifferent to guilt or grace. In its rhythm, I heard the lesson Harold had lived by. Every number must balance, every root must hold. I glanced toward the garden beyond the window, the sunlight cutting through the branches. Even the sharpest thorn, given time and pruning, could become part of a bloom. Mistakes, too, could grow into lessons, if tended with truth. The silence that followed felt heavier than words. Alex gathered the red folder, closed it, and set it aside with deliberate calm. Then he reached for another stack of papers, this one thinner, its edges marked in pale blue. Next, he said, we must address internal transfers recorded from the corporate account. The amounts total $320,000, allocated toward the purchase of a lake cabin in North Carolina. Mark's head jerked up. I can explain. Alex spread out the records, bank slips, transfer confirmations, a closing statement stamped with Mark's signature. The funds originated from the company's operating budget. Repayment schedule, none. Recorded purpose, personal retreat. Sophie looked at her husband in disbelief. You told me it was your inheritance. Mark's voice cracked. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a place to think. To think? Chad scoffed. With a private dock and a fireplace big enough for a truck? Mark glared at him. You wouldn't understand. Try me, Chad shot back. I lifted a hand, steadying the air between them. Arguing won't change numbers. Mark slumped into his chair. Mom, I didn't mean for it to spiral. The board was pressuring me to grow revenue. I thought if I closed one good deal, I could cover the gap before anyone noticed. And did you? I asked quietly. He shook his head. No, the deal fell through. Then Sophie lost her job, and I couldn't refill the account. I thought if I kept it quiet, it would resolve itself. Debts don't dissolve in silence, I said. He rubbed his face with both hands. I know. I just didn't want to look weak. Dad always made it seem so easy, taking care of everyone, solving everything. I wanted to prove I could do the same. By breaking the rules he lived. By. My voice was calm, not cruel. Mark's eyes met mine, shame flooding them. I messed up, I know. Sophie's tone softened, guilt still shadowing her own confession. We both did. Chad leaned back, crossing his arms. Guess the golden children tarnished too. Enough, I said. The word carried no anger, only finality. We're not measuring who failed worse. We're measuring how to rebuild. Alex interlaced his fingers, resting them on the table. The outstanding balance after expenses and partial repayments is approximately $110,000. Under trust law, misappropriation requires correction, but not necessarily prosecution if intent was absent and restitution is possible. Mark looked up, voice small. Can I fix it? Yes, Alex said, but it will take structure, accountability, and proof of consistent effort. Mrs. Whitfield will determine the terms, pending legal counsel. I turned toward my son. Mark, what you owe isn't just money, it's faith. Your father built this company brick by brick, ledger by ledger. You don't repay that with excuses. He nodded slowly. I understand. Then start by acknowledging what went wrong, I said. Not as punishment, but as the first step toward repair. He swallowed. I took money that wasn't mine. I wanted comfort before I'd earned it. Chad tilted his head. At least you're honest about it. Honesty's a start, I said, but humility is the price. Mark's shoulders sagged under the weight of the truth. Whatever you decide, I'll accept it. I just want a chance to make it right. I studied him, the boy who once built forts in the garden, who'd grown into a man still searching for approval in all the wrong places. Pride had driven him, but love could still steer him home. Alex stacked the papers neatly. We'll outline repayment terms in the settlement. Until then, the trust remains intact. Transparency, as always, protects everyone. Sophie reached for Mark's hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Their fingers interlaced, two people finally facing the same direction. Outside, a gust of wind swept across the roses, scattering petals along the walkway. Through the glass, I watched them settle softly on the ground, fragile but unbroken. Every mistake has its season, and every season carries the chance to bloom again. The afternoon light dimmed, as if the sky itself shared the heaviness in the room. Alex drew the final column of figures across a legal pad, his pen steady, deliberate. When he looked up, his expression was calm but firm. After reviewing both accounts, he said, the combined liabilities total approximately $250,000. That includes the unauthorized loan, the luxury purchases, and the cabin balance. All entries are verified. Sophie lowered her gaze to the table. Mark exhaled, the sound more like surrender than breath. Chad leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "That's $250,000, he muttered. "How do you even start to fix that?" Alex folded his hands. "With honesty first, then structure." I traced the grain of the table with my fingertips. The wood felt cool beneath my skin, grounded, unchanged by turmoil. "Debt isn't only about money," I said quietly. "It's about weight carried and lessons learned. You can repay a balance sheet, but rebuilding character takes longer." Mark nodded slowly. "We'll sell the cabin." Sophie's voice was thin. "And I'll return the jewelry." "Good," I replied. "But repayment without reflection is just another transaction." Mark looked up. "You're right. We've been careless." Alex glanced toward me. "Mrs. Whitfield, as trustee, you have authority to cover the debt if you choose. Shall we prepare a transfer?" I shook my head. "No, I can pay. I won't." The air shifted, startled into stillness. Even the clock seemed to hesitate between ticks. Sophie's voice wavered. "You'd let us face this alone?" "I'll let you face the truth," I said, "because shielding you now would rob you of the chance to grow." Mark's shoulders slumped. "I never wanted to take advantage of you." "I know," I said softly, "but good intentions can't balance books." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Then tell me what to do." "You'll rebuild what was lost," I said. "Not just the funds, but the trust behind them. You'll learn to make every dollar carry meaning again." Chad crossed his arms. "Harsh lesson." "Necessary one," I answered. The room fell quiet. Beyond the window, a breeze stirred the roses, their petals trembling against the fading light. It reminded me of late evenings with Harold, counting receipts at the kitchen table while the scent of the garden drifted through the open door. He used to say, "Mercy isn't soft. It's strength measured by restraint." Alex closed the ledger. "I'll prepare a proposal outlining repayment through labor and wage adjustment. It ensures accountability without legal action." Mark nodded. "Whatever it takes." Sophie's eyes glistened. "We don't deserve your patience." "Patience isn't given," I said. "It's earned." Chad cleared his throat. "Maybe we can help at the estate. Start small." "That's a start," I agreed. "Roses bloom best when every hand tends the soil." Sophie brushed away a tear. "We'll try." "Not try," I said. "Do." She nodded, lips trembling. "We'll do it." The weight of the day settled around us, not crushing, but shaping. There is a kind of silence that follows truth, the kind that clears space for rebuilding. When Alex gathered his files, the last rays of light caught the edge of Harold's photograph on the wall. His eyes seemed to watch over the room, not in judgment, but in quiet affirmation. That night, after everyone left, I lingered alone at the table. The scent of old paper and fading roses filled the air. I reached into my bag and withdrew Harold's letter, unfolding it with careful hands. The ink had softened over time, but the message stayed sharp. "Justice with gentleness, Joe. Never confuse love with indulgence. Tears blurred the lines as I whispered, I hope I'm getting it right. The room offered no answer, only the soft ticking of the clock and the distant hush of wind through leaves. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. Grief and resolve shared the same heartbeat. Mercy, I realized, was not the absence of pain. It was the choice to hold it until growth began. Justice isn't cold. It's warmth withheld until earned. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, soft and golden, brushing warmth over the table that yesterday had carried tension and tears. The same room that had witnessed confession now waited for renewal. Alex arrived early, carrying a folder the color of fresh leaves. He placed it before me with a quiet smile. This, he said, is the green folder. It documents Rosecliff Estates Landscaping, the company you founded 25 years ago. I thought it might help clarify the scope of your operations. Sophie glanced at the cover, puzzled. The garden business? Yes, Alex replied. Or rather, the branch that began as a garden business. He opened the folder and spread its contents across the table. Page after page displayed contracts, balance sheets, and certificates of completion from resorts across the Southeast. Logos from coastal hotels and mountain lodges appeared beside signatures and payment seals. Mark leaned closer. 12 resorts? Correct, Alex said. Rosecliff manages landscaping, maintenance, and seasonal decor for 12 major properties. Current valuation, approximately $3.2 million. Staff count, 50. Chad whistled low. That's not just a garden. Sophie blinked, reading each heading twice. You built this? Alone? I smiled faintly. With a few good hands and many long mornings, Harold started it as a side project, and when his health changed, I grew it into something steady. Mark looked up from the papers. Why didn't you tell us? Because you weren't ready to listen, I said gently. Some things must be seen, not said. Sophie touched a glossy photo of a resort courtyard draped in climbing roses. I thought it was just your hobby. Passion and patience can become business when they're tended right, I replied. The soil doesn't judge ambition, only effort. Alex nodded toward the figures. Each contract was renewed annually. Performance reviews exceed 95% satisfaction. Client references describe Mrs. Whitfield as punctual, detail-driven, and unwaveringly fair. Sophie's cheeks flushed. I used to joke about you spending all your time pruning. I didn't realize you were running an empire. Empires built from kindness last longer, I said. Every rose you see outside carries a name from someone who taught me something. That's how I remember lessons. Chad flipped through a sheet listing payroll. You employ 50 people. That's 50 families. Yes, I said. Each one mattered to your father. We believed work could heal dignity. Mark rested his elbows on the table, shaking his head in quiet awe. I used to think the garden was just a backdrop. Turns out it's the foundation. Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. Alex rose and opened it. Standing there was a man in a khaki uniform, hands folded politely. Mrs. Whitfield? He asked. I'm Hayes, general manager of the Palmetto Shores Resort. I stood, surprised. Mr. Hayes, I didn't expect you today. He smiled. We heard about the transition in your family and wanted to express our gratitude. Your team saved our resort last spring after the storm. Guests still talk about the new courtyard. It's peaceful, feels like home. Sophie blinked, taken aback by the formality in his tone. Hayes continued. I tell my staff, your garden taught me patience. Every bloom out there reminds me that beauty takes time. I felt warmth rise to my eyes, but I steadied my voice. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. That means more than you know. He nodded respectfully. We're renewing our contract for another 5 years, signed this morning. He set a folder beside the green one. Consider it a small vote of confidence. When he left, the room held a silence softer than any before, an understanding silence filled with something like pride. Chad leaned back, smiling. So the garden wasn't just decoration after all. No, I said. It was my way of building something that couldn't be taken with mockery. Work rooted in honesty doesn't wilt. Sophie looked down at the table, fingers tracing a photograph of blooming arches. You turned soil into sanctuary. Every seed knows its season, I said quietly. You can too. Alex closed the folder, the green cover gleaming under the light. With these records, Rosecliff's value becomes part of the family's understanding. This company stands as living proof of Mrs. Whitfield's stewardship. Mark exhaled, slow and deep. I'm proud of you, Mom. Be proud of the work, I said. It's what keeps us honest. Outside, the wind stirred through rows of roses, carrying petals into the air. They rose, circled, and drifted gently back to earth, like grace, returning exactly where it was needed. Sunlight crept higher across the table, catching on the gilded edge of the next folder in Alex's stack. He lifted it carefully, as though it carried something delicate, yet powerful. The gold shimmered softly beneath his fingertips before he opened it and began laying out papers stamped with foreign seals. This file, he said, contains records for Viridian Exports LLC, the international division of Rosecliff. It manages horticultural exports, hybrid roses, drought-resistant shrubs, and ornamental designs licensed abroad. Mark leaned in. Abroad? You mean other countries? Yes, Alex replied. Contracts with partners in Japan and Canada. Annual revenue, $1.1 million. Net worth across all entities places Mrs. Whitfield's holdings near $4.4 million. Chad gave a low whistle. You're telling us our stepmom's a millionaire? Sophie blinked, her mouth opening then closing, unable to form a sentence. Alex smiled faintly. She's been one for quite some time. Mark stared at me, eyes wide. Mom, you built all this while we were worrying about bills? I met his gaze gently. Worry teaches gratitude, and sometimes silence is the best teacher. Your father and I wanted you to learn value before wealth. Sophie's voice trembled. You learned international trade? Alone? Not alone, I said. There were mentors, late-night courses, plenty of trial and error. When Harold passed, I needed purpose. The garden offered it. Growth doesn't stop at borders. It travels with those willing to learn. Alex turned a page to reveal a certificate of compliance from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and export documentation, marked with customs stamps. Mrs. Whitfield completed online certifications in Incoterms and trade compliance. Every shipment recorded, every payment reconciled. No debt, no discrepancy. Chad leaned back, letting out a slow breath. You run more paperwork than most companies in the county. Sophie shook her head softly. I spent months pretending we were successful. You were actually building something real. I looked at her with quiet kindness. Appearances crumble. Integrity compounds. Mark laughed under his breath, the sound part wonder, part remorse. We mocked you for that garden. Turns out you were managing an enterprise we didn't even see. I smiled faintly. Vision isn't loud, it's patient. Alex continued. Viridian employs 6 part-time coordinators abroad. Shipments average 12 containers a year. Partnerships with botanical universities for research grants. These figures reflect consistent growth for over a decade. Sophie whispered, almost to herself. You were building legacy while we chased luxury. Legacy, I said, asks for sacrifice first, comfort later. The truth settled in the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, shaking his head. I can't believe I didn't see it. You saw what you wanted, I said gently. That's what pride does. It blinds. Chad gave a short nod. Well, pride met its match. Sophie looked at the rows of stamped pages, her earlier arrogance now replaced by awe. All those evenings you spent outside, working under the lights, I thought you were just passing time. I was preparing tomorrow, I said. Work done in dusk looks invisible until morning. Alex closed the gold folder with quiet satisfaction. With this, the full picture is clear. Rosecliff isn't just stable, it thrives. Mrs. Whitfield's stewardship secured not only this estate, but every livelihood connected to it. The codicil reflected foresight, not favoritism. Mark leaned forward, his voice low, earnest. You saved us, didn't you? Without saying a word. I rested a hand over his. I didn't save you. I planted structure. The rest is up to you. Sophie nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. We owe you more than apologies. Don't owe me, I said. Owe the future your honesty. The clock chimed the hour, its sound clear and bright. Outside, sunlight washed the rose bushes until they gleamed gold, each bloom a quiet testament that growth, like grace, doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes undeniable. Chad exhaled, voice barely above a whisper. We mocked a millionaire. No, I said softly. You mocked a gardener, and that's what I'll always be. The room filled with stillness, not of shame, but of recognition, the kind that turns regret into resolve. The afternoon sun angled through the blinds, striping the table in warm gold and quiet shadow. Alex unfolded a document thick with clauses and seals, each page marked by signatures yet to come. He smoothed it flat before us. This, he said, is the consent settlement agreement. It offers a lawful, restorative path forward. Every party will sign voluntarily, acknowledging responsibility and commitment to correction. Mark leaned forward, scanning the first lines. You've already drafted terms? They follow standard fiduciary guidance, Alex replied. Mrs. Whitfield has reviewed them conceptually. Today we refine and confirm. Sophie's eyes darted across the page. Is this punishment? No, Alex said. It's education through structure, rehabilitation, not reprisal. I folded my hands atop the table. This isn't about taking from you. It's about giving you the chance to rebuild the right way. Alex pointed to the first clause. Outstanding debts total $250,000. Under this agreement, the principal will reduce to $70,000 if the signatories meet each condition faithfully over the next 5 years. Mark lifted his gaze. 70? That's manageable. Conditional, Alex emphasized. Any violation reverts the amount to full balance plus interest and fees. Sophie swallowed. And the conditions? Alex turned to the next page. Each participant will be employed at Rosecliff Enterprises, earning a standardized hourly wage of $15. Position. Assignments will reflect skill and need. Wages will fund restitution incrementally. Annual reviews determine progress. Exceptional performance triggers step-down reductions every 12 months. Chad nodded slowly. So we work it off. Correct, Alex said. Not merely in labor, but in learning discipline. Sophie's brow furrowed. We'd be starting over. Exactly, I said. Starting honest. Mark exhaled. I deserve that. Alex continued. Clause 4. All expenditures require joint approval from supervisory accounting. No discretionary spending beyond essentials until restitution completes. Clause 5. Attendance mandatory for weekly financial workshops conducted by the CFO, Ms. Patel. Sophie looked down at her hands. This feels strict. I met her eyes gently. Freedom without foundation collapses. These walls will teach you how to stand. Mark nodded, voice quiet. We'll follow it. Alex added, Clause 6. Participants may not resign employment or transfer assets during the settlement term without trustee consent. Clause 7. Violation of ethical policy terminates agreement and reinstates full liability. Chad gave a short laugh, half grim, half respectful. Guess we're getting a crash course in accountability. Accountability, I said, is the language of trust. Sophie's shoulders eased, her voice faint. If we finish strong, what happens to the remainder? Alex smiled. Upon successful completion, remaining debt is forgiven, with commendation letters issued for record. Redemption documented, not whispered. I leaned forward, steady and calm. This is a bridge, not a chain. Walk it carefully, and it will carry you farther than shortcuts ever did. Mark studied the signature line, then looked at me. Mom, you really believe we can fix this? I wouldn't set a task I didn't believe you could complete, I said. He nodded, jaw firming with resolve. Then I'm in. Sophie hesitated a beat, then reached for the pen. Me too. Chad sighed, rubbing his temple. I came here to watch, not work. But maybe it's time I earned my place too. Alex gathered their signatures one by one, his fountain pen gliding with quiet grace. When he finished, he turned the final page toward me. I added my name last, sealing the promise. He capped the pen and rested it beside the document. All parties signed willingly. The law recognizes not only penalty, but purpose. I looked across the table at the three faces, flawed, frightened, but awake. Education, not exemption, I said softly. That's how Harold built everything worth keeping. Outside, a late breeze brushed through the garden, stirring petals into motion. They rose briefly, caught sunlight, then drifted down again, each one a small act of surrender that became somehow a kind of grace. The following morning carried a crisp calm, the kind that arrives after a storm has cleared but left the scent of rain behind. Everyone gathered again around the same table, now less a courtroom than a workshop for rebuilding. Alex placed a new document in the center, its title printed in firm type, House Rules and Residency Conditions. These guidelines, he said, exist to ensure fairness and daily discipline. They complement the settlement. Each of you will live under them for the duration of the 5-year term. Mark adjusted his glasses. Rules for living? Yes, Alex replied. Structure reinforces accountability. Sophie bit her lip. Are we losing the main house? I nodded gently. You'll move into the guest house. It's smaller, but peaceful. Comfort isn't the goal. Clarity is. Chad sighed. So no more luxury suites. Not for a while, Alex said. Clause 1. All non-essential luxury items will be sold. Proceeds contribute to restitution. Clause 2. Relocation to the guest house effective immediately. Mark glanced at Sophie, searching her face for reaction. She took a breath, then nodded. We'll manage. Alex continued. Clause 3. Daily work begins at 7 a.m. Attendance is mandatory. Clause 4. Evening reflection at 7 p.m. A short gathering to discuss progress and accountability. Sophie frowned softly. Every night? Yes, I said. Routine builds roots. We'll meet in the courtyard by the fountain. You'll share one lesson learned from the day. Call it gratitude in practice. Chad leaned back, half amused. Feels like boot camp. Feels like a second chance, Mark countered. Alex turned another page. Clause 5. No private access to corporate accounts. Monitoring will occur through shared transparency logs, reviewed weekly by the CFO. Participation is by consent. No surveillance, only oversight. Sophie nodded, voice small. I understand. Clause 6. Alex said. Weekly community contribution, assisting with garden maintenance or staff training. The purpose is humility through service. Chad groaned, though a hint of humor touched his tone. Guess I'll finally learn the difference between a rake and a hoe. You'll learn patience, I said. Tools teach more than titles. Alex looked toward me. Mrs. Whitfield, do you wish to add anything? Yes, I replied. One simple rule, honesty first. If you struggle, speak. Silence breeds shadow. We can't fix what we can't see. Mark straightened, shoulders squared. Understood. Sophie clasped her hands. If we follow all this, will things ever feel normal again? Better than normal, I said. They'll feel earned. Alex nodded. Clause 7. Periodic evaluations. Consistent compliance will lead to incremental trust, access to larger roles, adjusted wages, and ultimately, freedom from these conditions. Chad shifted uneasily. And if someone quits? Then the agreement reverts to full debt plus penalties, Alex said. This is voluntary, but binding once accepted. Chad rubbed his jaw. So we stay the course. That's how growth works, I said. No shortcut worth taking lasts. The weight of the document settled over the room, not oppressive, but steady. A map drawn with lines of care instead of control. One by one, they reached for pens, signing beside each clause. When they finished, I gathered the pages, pressing them flat with my palm. These rules aren't cages, I said. They're trellises. Follow them, and you'll climb. Outside, the faint hum of the fountain blended with the rustle of leaves. The guest house stood at the edge of the garden, modest and bright beneath the sun. Its porch overlooked rows of roses, each one trimmed, steady, alive. Sophie looked through the window, her reflection merging with the blooms. It's beautiful, she whispered. It always was, I said. You just needed the right view. Mark slipped an arm around her shoulders. Chad exhaled, half a laugh, half resolve. Alex gathered his briefcase. Then we proceed. Orientation begins tomorrow at sunrise. The clock chimed 7 as he spoke, each note crisp and clear. Evening would bring their first reflection, a ritual not of shame, but of beginnings. Discipline, like dawn, comes quietly, but it never fails to arrive. The next morning, the light came early, pale and new, washing the courtyard in quiet gold. A thin mist clung to the hedges, softening their edges, while the sound of the fountain whispered through the still air. Alex stood by the patio table, a stack of final documents in his hand, a small hourglass placed beside them. The sand inside glimmered faintly, slipping grain by grain through its narrow throat. This, he said, setting the pages down, is the formal execution of your settlement. Once signed, the agreement becomes binding under state and trust law. Every condition, every clause, takes effect from this moment. Mark nodded, shoulders squared. We're ready. Sophie's hand trembled slightly as she reached for a pen, but I saw more resolve than fear in her eyes. The faint hum of cicadas threaded through the morning, steady and patient. Alex turned the hourglass over, letting the first grains fall. This is not a countdown, he said quietly. It's a reminder. Time is your ally when used with purpose. Chad crossed his arms. 5 years. Feels long when you say it out loud. It'll feel shorter when you fill it with growth, I said. Mark glanced at his wife. We'll handle it together. Sophie nodded, managing a small smile. Together. As she leaned forward, a sudden wince crossed her face. Her hand went instinctively to her abdomen. Sophie? I asked gently. She took a breath, shaky but hopeful. I think I need to see a doctor. Alex paused, brow raised. Are you unwell? Her eyes glistened. No, I'm expecting. The courtyard fell silent, the word hanging like a tender promise between us. Mark froze, then broke into a stunned laugh. "You mean—" She nodded. "I just found out. Last night." Mark took her hand, squeezing it tight. "We're going to be parents." I felt warmth swell in my chest, steady and deep. New life, arriving just as they were learning how to nurture their own. "Then this agreement isn't just for you," I said softly. "It's for the family you're building." Sophie's voice trembled. "I want our child to grow up proud of us." "Then start now," I said. "Let this be the soil where that pride takes root." Alex adjusted his glasses, eyes kind. "Congratulations. A child brings reason to every effort." He placed the first document before them. "Shall we proceed?" Sophie looked at me. "May I borrow a pen?" I opened my purse and withdrew Harold's fountain pen, the same one he'd used to sign their wedding gift years ago, the same one that had inked every deed in our family's history. Its black lacquer gleamed softly in the light. "Use this," I said. "It's more than ink. It's a promise kept." Her fingers hesitated before wrapping around it. "Thank you." Alex pointed to the first line. "Sign here. Each signature affirms understanding and willingness." Sophie pressed the nib to the paper, her hand steady now. Mark followed, then Chad, his strokes bold and certain. When the pen returned to me, I added my name last, the curve of each letter echoing the countless documents Harold and I once signed side by side. Alex gathered the completed pages, slipping them into a protective sleeve. All signatures confirmed, effective immediately. The final grains of sand slid through the hourglass, landing in a soft mound below. He turned it upright again. "Time begins anew," he said. Sophie cradled her hands over her midsection, eyes closed for a moment, as if listening to a rhythm only she could hear. Mark drew her close, resting his forehead against hers. I watched them quietly, the image folding into memory. Youth bending toward responsibility, love tempered by consequence. Harold's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "Justice, Joe, when mixed with love, becomes legacy." I glanced at the fountain pen gleaming in the sun and whispered to the still morning, "Justice with love." Outside, the roses lifted toward the light, opening one petal at a time, as though the garden itself had heard and answered. The months that followed unfolded like chapters written in soil and sweat. Spring turned to summer, and with it came early mornings scented with dew and determination. The guest house lights flickered on before dawn each day, and by sunrise, 3 figures walked side by side down the gravel path toward the garden, heads bowed, tools in hand. Mark learned the rhythm of labor before breakfast, the weight of a wheelbarrow, the patience of pruning, the art of repairing what he once overlooked. Each task tested him quietly, loading mulch in the rain, balancing ledgers by lamplight, listening before he spoke. The once proud manager became a student again, steady and deliberate. Sophie wore simple clothes now, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hands smudged with earth. She learned the language of invoices and soil samples, of budgets trimmed like hedges. In the office trailer, Maya Patel guided her through accounting logs, teaching her how every decimal carried dignity. "Accuracy," Maya would say, "is a form of respect." Sophie took notes in silence, eyes focused, her pen steady as roots seeking ground. Chad joined the maintenance crew, trading polished loafers for worn boots. He learned the cadence of teamwork, lifting, listening, showing up. At first, he grumbled through dawn's chill, but soon the rhythm softened him. He began checking on others, patching a broken hose before being asked, sharing his lunch with a new hire. Humility, once foreign, now fit like a second skin. Every evening, as the clock reached 7, they gathered in the courtyard. Candles flickered on the fountain's edge. Sometimes they spoke of progress. Other times they sat in companionable silence, the sound of water their shared prayer. One night, Mark looked at me across the table. I used to think leadership meant control. Now I see it means service. Sophie nodded beside him. And gratitude isn't weakness, it's awareness. Chad smiled faintly. Turns out the dirt teaches more than the desk ever did. I listened, saying little, pride warming quietly behind my composure. Growth doesn't shout. It settles in the heart like sunrise. Slow, certain, undeniable. By the 6th month, Rosecliff Estates flourished like never before. Contracts expanded, the staff doubled. GM Hayes returned with news of a major deal, a 5-year partnership with a luxury resort chain in Hawaii, valued at $1.5 million. During the signing, Hayes clasped my hand. Your family's transformation changed more than this company. It changed how we see business, with patience, with grace. He turned to Mark, Chad, and Sophie, smiling. Your garden taught me patience. Mark blinked, caught off guard by the words, then looked toward me. We're just following the example planted here. Sophie's eyes shimmered, not with shame, but with pride. We're learning how to grow without taking. Chad chuckled softly, and without shortcuts. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hedges, I walked the rows of roses alone. The petals glowed amber in the fading light, each bloom a quiet testament to labor redeemed. I paused beside the fountain, where reflections of my children wavered in the water, bent but unbroken. Harold once told me that forgiveness is a seed, not a sentence, that it demands tending, sunlight, and time. Watching them now, I finally understood what he meant. When the day's work ended, Mark stayed behind to clean the tools. Sophie organized invoices in neat stacks. Chad swept the courtyard, humming under his breath. None of it was for praise. It was simply who they were becoming. As I turned toward the house, a breeze swept through, scattering petals across the path. They landed softly at my feet, pale and luminous in the dusk. Redemption, I thought, is quieter than regret, but far more lasting. Tomorrow would bring more work, more dawns, more lessons. But tonight, the air smelled of promise. Autumn crept in softly, tinting the edges of the garden gold. The air carried the scent of rain and ripening fruit, a gentle reminder that every season asks something new of the soul. Work continued, steady and sure, until one gray morning when the rhythm faltered. Sophie was missing from roll call. Mark stood by the fountain, checking his watch. She wasn't feeling great last night, he said, worry darkening his eyes. I'll drive to the clinic. I nodded. Go. Family first. By noon, he returned with shoulders slumped and eyes rimmed red. They've admitted her. It's early. Too early. She's in preterm labor. The courtyard fell silent. Even the fountain seemed to hush. Chad rose from his bench. What do you need? Mark's voice shook. Time. Just time with her. I reached for my ledger, the same one that tracked every clause and condition. The ink lines blurred slightly as I turned to the section titled Attendance and Wage Compliance. Rules gave order, but life often asked for grace. Alex arrived within the hour, summoned quietly. Together, we reviewed the agreement under the porch light. Clause 7 allows temporary modification in emergencies, he said. You may authorize a compassionate leave with adjusted hours. Work restored later, debt balance intact. I looked up from the page. She's still under medical care? Yes, Mark said. The doctors say every hour matters. Then your place is with her, I answered. He blinked, startled. But the rules... Rules serve growth, I said, not grief. His voice cracked. I don't deserve this kindness. No one earns compassion, I said. They're simply trusted to carry it forward. I wrote the amendment myself, the pen gliding slow and steady. 6-week leave, restoration plan to follow. No penalty. Accountability resumes upon recovery. I signed my name, then slid the paper toward Alex for witness. He added his signature. Legally sound, he said softly. Morally stronger. Mark folded the page with trembling hands. Thank you, Mom. Go, I said. She needs you more than any ledger does. When he was gone, I lingered by the open window, watching rain trace patterns across the glass. The garden blurred beyond it, rows of roses bowed under the weight of water, yet still holding their blooms, upright. Strength, I thought, was never the absence of softness. It was the choice to hold steady in a storm. 2 weeks later, Mark returned with eyes tired but bright. Sophie had delivered a small, fragile girl. She's early, he said, voice hushed, but fighting. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. So are you. He nodded, emotion catching in his throat. We named her Grace. Then let her grow in it, I said. Chad smiled faintly. Seems fitting. For the next month, Mark split his days between hospital halls and the garden, catching up on tasks after sundown. Not because I asked, but because gratitude carried its own discipline. When Sophie finally came home, thinner but glowing, the courtyard filled with light again. During their first evening reflection, Mark read a note aloud. Mercy tests power. Power proves itself through mercy. He folded it carefully, tucking it beside the amendment I'd signed. Sophie sat close, their daughter cradled in her arms, a tiny hand curling toward the sky. She'll know this place, she whispered. She'll grow up seeing what second chances look like. I smiled, watching the infant's fingers grasp the air. Then she'll learn that strength blooms where love is lawful. The fountain murmured softly behind us, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly balanced. Law and tenderness, order and grace, each completing the other. Winter came quietly, settling over Savannah with the hush of distant bells. The roses slept under burlap wraps, their stems trimmed and waiting for spring. Inside the study, a fire flickered low as Alex arranged a fresh stack of papers across the desk. Maya Patel stood beside him, her calm precision reflected in every column of figures. We've completed the audit, Alex said, sliding one document forward. It appears a portion of the $80,000 loan routed through a shell company called Benson Brokerage. Sophie stiffened in her chair. Evan Benson, she murmured. He said it was a consulting firm. Maya met her gaze gently. It's not. The address links to a P.O. box. No staff, no tax filings, no client list. Funds arrived from your transfer, then disappeared into private holdings. Mark frowned. So he used her name to cover his tracks? Partially, Alex said. He created the illusion of shared liability. But paper trails tell truth. We have wire confirmations, time-stamped signatures, and mismatched invoices. Sophie's hands trembled as she clasped them together. He told me everyone moved money like that it was just smart accounting. I studied her face. Behind the guilt there was clarity, the dawning recognition that deceit thrives in borrowed confidence. Did you sign anything you didn't read? She nodded slowly. I trusted him. I thought, if it looked professional, it was safe. Trust without verification is surrender, I said. But knowledge can rebuild what ignorance destroys. Maya laid a second folder beside the first. We traced 3 transactions from the same shell company to offshore accounts. With your cooperation, we can assemble a full timeline for investigators. Sophie blinked, startled. Investigators? Yes, Alex said. Financial Crimes Division. They'll handle the prosecution. Your cooperation can reframe your role from participant to witness. Truth told early carries weight. Mark reached for her hand. You should do it. It's the right thing. Sophie exhaled, slow and unsteady. I want to. I need to. He used my name, my signature. I have to make it right. I nodded. Then start by telling everything you know. Every date, every conversation, every document. She straightened, resolve building behind her voice. He approached me last year, said he could restructure assets to make us look wealthier on paper. I didn't ask questions. I wanted to impress you, to fit in. When he sent forms, I just signed. Did he profit? Maya asked. Yes. He took a cut from every transfer. I thought it was a fee. Alex made notes with quiet efficiency. We'll forward these to the Department of Financial Integrity. You'll be summoned for a statement. Cooperation will count toward restitution credit. Sophie looked at me, eyes pleading. Will this undo everything? No, I said. It will untangle it. Lies bind tighter than debt, but truth cuts clean. Tears welled but didn't fall. I thought success meant shortcuts. It means stewardship, I said softly. Evan mistook cleverness for wisdom. Don't follow him down. Mark gave her hand a squeeze. We'll face it together. Maya gathered the documents, her tone measured. Evan's record shows other victims. Your evidence could help them too. Sophie's voice steadied. Then let's help them. Alex slipped the folders into his briefcase. We'll deliver everything this afternoon. Once the case opens, Benson will answer to the law. Outside, wind pressed against the shutters, carrying the faint scent of rain. The garden, stripped bare, waited for its return. I rose from my chair and rested a hand on Sophie's shoulder. Winter tests roots, I said. If they're real, they hold. She looked up at me through tear-bright eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me. Justice doesn't abandon, I said. It redeems. As the fire crackled, the last page slipped into the envelope, evidence sealed, consequence set in motion. Somewhere beyond the cold, spring was already stirring. Spring arrived with soft rain, each drop tracing silver lines across the garden paths. Dawn came earlier now, pale and forgiving, spilling through the trellis where new rosebuds had begun to bloom. The courtyard, once the stage for humiliation, now opened like a chapel, its silence filled not with shame, but with peace. That morning, I stood by the fountain, pruning shears resting loosely in my hand. The air smelled of earth and wet petals. Behind me, footsteps crunched across the gravel. 3 sets, steady and unhurried. Morning, Mom, Mark said, his voice calm, sure. Beside him, Sophie carried a small basket of seedlings. Chad followed with a coil of hose draped over one shoulder, a faint smile playing across his face. We gathered in a circle beneath the pergola. For 6 months, we'd met here at 7 a.m. sharp, each reflection more genuine than the last. But today felt different, lighter somehow, as if the garden itself sensed the shift inside them. Mark spoke first. We've reached the end of the first year. He paused, glancing toward the guest house beyond the hedge. I thought I'd miss the comfort of the mansion. Turns out I don't. I've learned more in that little space than in all those rooms combined. Sophie smiled softly, touching the basket's rim. The guest house taught me simplicity and gratitude. I don't chase appearances anymore. I build roots. Chad nodded. Guess I learned that leadership starts with showing up. Early, not late. He chuckled under his breath. Didn't see that coming. I looked at them, their postures straight, their faces open, no longer burdened by pretense. Growth looks good on you, I said. You've kept your promises. Sophie handed me the basket. Inside lay a cluster of tiny white seedlings, fragile but eager. "We planted these in honor of the garden's next season," she said. "They're called peace lilies." I touched one leaf gently, its edges trembling under my fingertips. "A fitting name," she smiled. "We wanted to give back what this place gave us." Mark glanced toward Chad. "And we have something else." Chad stepped forward, holding a worn ledger, once filled with debts, now balanced to the penny. "First year cleared," he said proudly. "On time, every dollar earned." I accepted it, my heart lifting. Harold would be proud. Mark's eyes softened. "We hope you are too." "I am," I said, "but pride isn't mine to keep. It's yours to carry." Sophie glanced toward a new recruit kneeling by the rose beds, struggling with a tangled hose. "He's been having trouble with measurements," she said, walking over. She crouched beside the young man, guiding his hands gently. "Measure twice, cut once, with kindness," she told him, her tone patient and sure. The phrase drifted through the air, familiar and warm. My breath caught, the same words I'd spoken months ago when frustration ruled her face. Now she passed them on, softer, wiser. When she returned, I met her eyes. "You remembered." She nodded. "You planted it." Chad wiped his brow, grinning. "Looks like the student's teaching now." "That's how legacy works," I said quietly. The bell from the guest house chimed 7, marking another completed day, another fulfilled promise. Mark turned toward the path leading back to work. "We should get going. Trucks leave at 8. "Go," I said. "The world's waiting for what you've learned." As they walked away, the rising sun broke through the clouds, casting soft gold across their backs. The three of them moved in rhythm, steady steps, shoulders straight, heads high. I lingered a moment longer by the fountain. The peace lilies swayed gently in their basket, white blooms reflecting in the water's calm surface. For months I'd tended this soil, teaching them to kneel before they could rise. Now they stood, not above it, but rooted within it, humbled, healed, whole. A single tear welled and slipped free, though it carried no sorrow, just gratitude. The seed had bloomed. The day dawned bright and still, the kind of morning that hums with quiet promise. Dew clung to each rose petal, catching the sunlight like small jewels. I stood once more in the courtyard where everything had begun, where pride once spoke louder than gratitude, and laughter had stung sharper than thorns. Now only birdsong filled the air. Alex arrived first, briefcase in hand, his expression calm, eyes kind. Maya followed, carrying a slim folder bound in navy blue. They exchanged a glance, one of quiet satisfaction, the kind that follows long work completed in good faith. "Mrs. Whitfield," Alex began, "we've concluded the annual review. All conditions have been met or exceeded. Wages consistent, attendance perfect, no policy violations. By the settlement terms, step-down reduction applies." He opened the folder, revealing fresh pages marked Addendum of Grace. Mark, Sophie, and Chad joined us moments later, their uniforms dusted with soil, hands still faintly scented of lavender and cedar. They gathered around, unsure but hopeful. Alex read aloud. "Effective immediately, the remaining balance reduces from $70,000 to $45,000, reflecting 12 months of excellence and community service exceeding requirement." Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. 45? Already? "Progress rewards patience," Alex said. Chad gave a low whistle. "Didn't think I'd ever see numbers drop like that." Maya smiled gently. "Each of you completed over 200 hours in the community garden project, mentoring youth, restoring public parks, hosting workshops. Service earns grace." Mark exhaled deeply, relief softening his face. We did it. I looked at them, pride swelling quietly in my chest. You did more than that. You rebuilt what money could never buy. Trust, respect, purpose. Alex closed the folder and set a pen before me. One signature remains to finalize the amendment. I lifted Harold's fountain pen, the ink glinting blue in the morning light. As I pressed it to the page, I thought of his words. Justice, Joe, is the garden you tend when the world forgets how to care. The pen moved slowly, gracefully, sealing not punishment, but peace. When I finished, I set it down beside the lilies Sophie had planted weeks ago. The debt lessens, I said, but the lesson remains. What matters now is what you plant next. Mark stepped forward, eyes clear. I've started a scholarship fund for local apprentices. It's small now, but growing. Good, I said. Knowledge, like seed, multiplies when shared. Sophie held a folder close to her chest. I passed my certification exams. Maya says I can start handling payroll. Maya nodded proudly. She's earned it. Chad cleared his throat. And I've been offered the foreman position. Guess hard work really does show. It always does, I said. The breeze stirred gently through the courtyard, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. In the distance, laughter from the staff mingled with the rustle of leaves. Life, real, restored, was unfolding all around. Alex gathered his papers. As for Benson, the court concluded last week, convicted on multiple counts. Your testimony, Mrs. Whitfield, and Mrs. Sophie's cooperation ensured restitution for every victim. Sophie's eyes filled, not with tears of guilt, but with gratitude. Thank you for guiding me through it. You guided yourself, I said. I only held the lamp. Mark placed a small envelope on the table. Final wage report and reserve fund. 6 months saved like you asked. We're ready to stand on our own again. Then do so, I said softly. Not apart from this garden, but as part of its legacy. They stood together, no longer fragments of pride and error, but branches grown strong from the same root. I turned my gaze upward. Clouds drifted past the morning sun, scattering light across the courtyard in dappled gold. The fountain glimmered. The lilies swayed. The roses, in full bloom, stretched toward the sky. Forgiveness isn't weakness, I said quietly. It's strength choosing peace. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mark took Sophie's hand, Chad rested his on his brother's shoulder, and they turned toward the gate, ready to meet a world that had been waiting for their return. I lingered, the pen still warm in my fingers. The garden hummed softly, alive with second chances. Somewhere beyond the hedge, I could almost hear Harold's voice, calm and certain. Well done, Joe. And for the first time in years, I whispered back. Balance restored. The sunlight deepened, and the day moved forward. Steady, golden, whole. Evening fell slowly over Rosecliff, brushing the sky with soft streaks of rose and amber. The courtyard glowed beneath the fading light, the fountain murmuring like a hymn. I sat on the bench beneath the arbor where Harold and I once planned the future, a future that had come full circle in ways neither of us could have foreseen. The door to the guest house creaked open, and Sophie stepped out, holding baby Grace against her shoulder. The child gurgled softly, fingers clutching the fabric of her mother's blouse. Sophie smiled when she saw me. She naps better when I walk her outside. Maybe she likes the sound of the fountain. She was born to it, I said. She's heard water before words. Sophie joined me on the bench, rocking gently. She's growing fast. It feels like every sunrise, she's someone new. That's what healing looks like, I replied. Small changes, every day, until you realize the pain has turned into strength. Mark came next, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, carrying a small box. "Got the final statement from the scholarship fund," he said. "2 apprentices enrolled this quarter. One of them's a single mom." I smiled. "You're giving what you once needed most, opportunity." He sat beside Sophie, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Feels right. Feels earned." Chad followed soon after, dirt under his nails and a sun-faded cap tucked in his hand. "Foreman badge arrived today," he said, showing the engraved tag. "Never thought I'd care about a title again, but this one means something." "Because you built it," I said. He grinned, a hint of pride softening his voice. Guess humility finally taught me worth. We sat together in easy silence, listening to the rhythm of water and wind. The air carried a gentle sweetness from the jasmine vines climbing the stone wall. Sophie looked toward the garden, rows upon rows of roses glowing in the last light. "Do you ever miss the mansion?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "I miss nothing that required losing myself to keep." Mark nodded slowly. "We used to think wealth was measured in things. Turns out, it's measured in what you can give back." I reached for his hand. "You've given more than you realize. This garden isn't mine anymore. It's yours, and hers, and every pair of hands that shaped it." Sophie glanced down at her daughter. "She'll grow up seeing what love looks like when it's disciplined, and what discipline looks like when it's kind. Then she'll be richer than any of us ever were," I said. Chad leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know, I used to joke that roses were just decoration. Now I catch myself trimming them after hours." "Roses forgive carelessness," I said. "They bloom again when given another chance." The clock in the hallway chimed 7, the sound warm and familiar. Reflection hour. We rose together, crossing the courtyard to the table where the ritual began a year ago. I lit a single candle, its flame bending in the breeze. Mark spoke first. "Today, I taught a new hire how to read the balance sheets." He reminded me of myself, eager, nervous, proud. I told him the same thing you told me. Numbers don't lie, but they can teach. Sophie smiled. "I stayed late to finish payroll. Every paycheck feels like a promise kept." Chad added, "We finished the west wall ahead of schedule. The team didn't rush. They cared. That's new." I looked at them, light flickering across their faces. "Your father used to say, a family's worth isn't proven in comfort, but in character. Tonight, you've shown both." A soft coo rose from Grace's cradle, where she slept under the canopy. Her tiny hands twitched, dreaming perhaps of a world built on steady love. Sophie brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm grateful for every hard day that led here." I placed a hand over hers. "Gratitude is the final harvest." The candle flame steadied, reflected in the fountain's rippling water. Around us, the roses swayed in rhythm with the wind, as if bowing in quiet approval. For a long while, no one spoke. Words were no longer needed. The garden told our story now, rooted in repentance, grown through labor, blooming in grace.